Parafencers sometimes describe their sport as a knife fight in a phone booth, not because it's brutal, but because there's literally nowhere to hide in parafencing. You start within touching distance with your frames locked in and the distance set, which means every millimeter of angle and trunk control and every twitch of your hand and your blade makes a difference. It makes it fast, tactical, and even sometimes relentless, and it's a pressure you can feel by watching it. I'm Brian Wendell, and this is First to 15. Our guest is Eric Soyka, USA Fencing's national parafencing coach, and also a coach at the Phoenix Center and Rogue Fencing Academy. We're going to talk about how Eric started coaching parafencing, what the Paris 2024 Paralympics taught him, maybe some myths about parafencing, and then also some steps that any club, including the one that you listening might be a member of, can take to build a parafencing program right in your own backyard. And then we're going to look ahead at how parafencing can grow. So, hey, Eric, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Brian.
So, how did you first get involved in parafencing as a coach, and what made you kind of commit to it long term and obviously end up on USA Fencing's radar to where we said we want to hire this guy to lead the entire parafencing program for the United States?
Sure. When I was first starting up the club 20 years ago, roughly, one of my athletes was unfortunately riding his bike and hit by a car and broke both of his knees.
Mm-hmm.
And the coach at Vassar, his name is Aaron Canlick, at the time had suggested that maybe this athlete try parafencing. And that was kind of like my very first introduction into what parafencing is and, what it's about and how it works. That athlete ultimately decided that he was going to kind of like rehab through fencing. So he never really fully committed to doing parafencing. But it just so happened that a number of years later, one of my other athletes was involved in an accident where she was kicked by a horse. And it led to a series of, physical and neurological issues, where we ultimately made the suggestion that maybe try parafencing. Let's see how that works for you. And that was pretty much when I started to kind of like go down the rabbit hole of everything that is parafencing and just kind of like absorb myself in videos of competitions and, learning more about the sport and the rules and, how it can function from, the athlete perspective, from the coaching perspective. And yeah, it's been a many years journey.
So looking back on that, like one thing that you and I have talked about and that we're going to talk about on this episode is like the future of parafencing and, how we can get even better. But I think it's also helpful to know like how far we've come. So like when you first were introduced to parafencing, what can you set the scene for us? Like what was it like? How much recognition were people getting? Because I get the sense that like for those watching on YouTube, they can see we both have, the parafencing logo on our shirts and there's more visibility for sure. I have a feeling, but I'd love to hear how you feel it's changed and grown already.
Yeah. I mean, so when I first was introduced to parafencing, you could occasionally see it at national tournaments, of course. But like there wasn't any like education about what it was, how to get started. Everything felt kind of like, it exists. Not a lot of people know about it. So I think like to really find out about what parafencing was, you had to talk to like Jerry Benson or Gary Vanderweghe. And, there were a lot of people that could help or Maestro Lestavitsky was one of the people who would, be able to kind of like guide people along that path. But like you had to kind of go out of your way to get to know them. Whereas I think now we have a lot more media attention on parafencing, which is phenomenal. It's really helped the growth of the sport. I think we've always had some like young athletes, like Kat Beaucamp was young when she was fencing. Lauren was relatively young when she was fencing. Now we have Abe Kaplan, and we have a bunch of younger athletes who are coming up too. So I think that having that appeal for younger athletes and then getting those athletes to stick around has been like pivotal to the growth of the program. I think, this is one of the first times we've really seen a number of athletes, not just a small select few, but like most of the athletes from our Paris program pushing forward into another Paralympic Games.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're going to talk about Paris in a little bit next, but can you take us into your club, and how did you, or did you, like, convert that space into being more welcoming and effective for coaching parafencers? And we should say your club coaches able-bodied and parafencers alike, so you had to keep both setups intact, I imagine.
Sure. And, for a lot of club owners out there, I have a small club. We have
Mhm.
four strips in my club.
Okay.
And it goes from like wall to wall with those strips, right? So we're not talking like one of those huge mega clubs. Um, what we did was we found a small area because there's a post that kind of sits in the middle of the club, and that separates the strips just enough that we could fit a frame just inside that area
Mm.
and still have room for everybody to keep fencing around it. So what we did was we put a frame there. We used that as a training area. Um, and when parafencers come in, I think everybody at the club has like always been very excited to just fence with them. So it's always been kind of like an atmosphere of inclusion. And for me, that's a culture that I didn't really have to work very hard to instill, but like I think it's still in a lot of clubs, it's the work of the coach to make sure that that kind of culture is ingrained in the athletes, right? Where
Mhm.
from the little kids all the way through the adults, people may have biases that they don't even recognize that they have. And they may at first be a little timid to sit in the chair and fence with one of our parafencers. Um, but I think after they do, they very quickly come to the realization that, hey, this is just fencing. I
Yeah.
happen to be sitting while I'm doing it, but like this is everything's the same. Like my ideas are the same. The angles are a little bit different, but like I can figure that out. And the majority of them, like, never really had a complaint, right? Everybody's had a lot of fun. So like in terms of making the club environment more inclusive, it's really just setting things up so that way the athletes that you have in the club have a space to be, but more than that, have a home, right?
Yeah.
Socially, and within the room itself.
That's great. So now let's go inside the Paralympics as we continue kind of looking back. What were, the challenges and the emotions and the excitement that you faced there, and what did you bring home from that you still, we're recording this in October, so 15, 14 months later, that you still use in your club and in your coaching today?
Sure. So I think one of the things that's really important for people to understand is the games, while they're intense and while they're like, the thing that athletes ultimately strive for, my personal opinion is that qualifying for them is harder than doing the games,
Mhm.
right? Because the qualification cycle is extremely selective, right? For parafencing, effectively, we had to rely for like a guaranteed qualification on being the top athlete in our zone, right? So that meant that like you have a very small number of athletes who are going to qualify out of each area.
In a strong
And
zone too, right? Like Brazil
yeah,
is really good. Canada has some great fencers. So yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. And I think every zone has some like excellent fencers and excellent athletes that they're working with, right?
Hmm.
So there's no guarantee that like you're going to make it. So I think the qualification is like more stressful, especially in parafencing. That qualification cycle is like between like a year and a half and 2 years long. So it is a long time where the athletes are like having to perform month after month, right? They
Mm.
have to go to their competition, recover, prepare for the next, do it, recover, prepare for the next, do it, right? Because the way our point system works, they really kind of have to hit every major international competition, and it's very very challenging for us. Um, on the world stage where our program's at right now, given the level of
Hmm.
experience of most of the athletes in the Paris cycle. Um, so I think we really heavily relied on, our zonal qualification path and like world championships kind of differentiating us in the points values for that qualification process. But Paris in and of itself was an absolutely, amazing event. Um, I'll be honest, it kind of felt relieving that it's just like any other competition.
Mm.
Um, so like when you
Even
get
in the
there,
Grand Palais, you were able to convince yourself that this is
I
just
was.
another World Cup. Okay.
I was able to lie to myself really, really good to keep those nerves down.
I saw some
Um,
photos of you coaching, and you were locked in. I didn't see any of you like looking around, like, "Wow, this place is crazy." So that's interesting to hear because I would have been overwhelmed in the moment. I have to feel.
it's yeah, and I will say like that venue was absolutely gorgeous, right? I have a lot of pictures on my phone of just like, that just how majestic it was, and how huge the environment was.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, we still have all the same processes in place. There's equipment control, right? It's a little bit more strict there than it is in a normal World Cup, but we still have equipment control. We still have a call room. We still have all the stuff that we would have in place normally for any other tournament.
Yeah.
And I think it was important for me to give the energy that this is just like every other tournament, so that the athletes have the energy like, I'm going to compete like I normally compete. I'm going to go, I'm going to try to win. I'm going to try to do my best,
Yeah.
right? And not get hung up on the fact that, oh, it's the games.
Yeah. And obviously we had a strong result there. So I want to switch gears a little bit and help people understand parafencing. Maybe their only exposure to it was watching Team USA in the Paralympics, or maybe they came down to one of the events that we hosted here in the United States for previously IWAS and now World Ability Sport, World Parafencing. Like tactically, technically, what is uniquely parafencing? What shares the DNA with between able-bodied fencing and parafencing? Like what are some similarities and differences maybe between the two as people are becoming bigger fans and maybe smarter fans of parafencing?
I'm really glad that you asked that question. For me, I think that the two is very similar.
Okay.
Parafencing kind of happens in this like microcosm, right? It's like you can or lean, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's about like all the distance that you can have. You have that mobility in the chair. Whereas in the able-bodied side of things, you have 14 meters of space to kind of like fence in. So
Yeah.
some of the key differences would be like the angles that you have to learn to work with. When someone leans back all the way, they can take that high line target out of distance, but it's really hard to take the low line target out of distance. So you
Hmm.
have to think about how angles impact things. Or if someone leans forward all the way, right, hitting to the body might be a little bit harder because your tip will slide down if you're fencing foil or epee. So you have to maybe aim a little bit more towards the shoulder. So your targeting has to be a little bit more precise. Um, One of the things that I do think is a little bit different, and you kind of like alluded to this in your intro, is you're always in distance to do something. Even when the athletes kind of like break away, they have to keep a really, really high degree of readiness. In able
Hmm.
body fencing, you can kind of break that distance really big and give yourself like somewhat of a break, like in epee. In saber,
Yeah.
that's not really going to happen quite the same way.
Right.
Um, but like you have that ability to kind of like play with space and have more time that you create. We don't get that time in parafencing.
Even if you
Equally,
just want to like catch your breath for 1 second, you got to wait till the touch is done, right? Yeah.
we've even had athletes use video replay as a tactic for like
Yeah.
kind of like taking a break and catching their breath.
It's smart.
Um, yeah, I mean, you do what you got to do, right? I
Sure.
also think one of the other big differences is in able-bodied fencing, you can pass, right? In
Right.
parafencing, because you're tied to that chair, you're gonna be here. You're just gonna be like fighting each other, you know, and you're never gonna be able to kind of like change that distance too dramatically once you hit a certain point.
Yeah.
So I do think that like the key differences end up being the angles that you have to learn to work at because of how you're locked into the frame,
Hmm.
and the fact that the distance is so much tighter all the time. You can't
Yeah.
really make big distance. Other than that, I feel like tactics are really similar in terms of like I can trap to make prayer or post. I can push aggressively and make an attack. I can, invite somebody. All those things exist in pair fencing like they do in able bodied.
Yeah. And I think the more people watch, the more they'll see those similarities. How about some myths or misconceptions that you want to just like get let's say retire them right away. Things that you hear and you're like, no, that's respectfully, that's not right at all.
Sure. I think one of the big myths that people still kind of have to work around is that like all pair fencers might be full-time chair users.
Ah. Mm-hmm.
Um, So like something that people might see is like after a bout, someone stands up and to celebrate, and they're like, wait a minute, that's weird. You're wheelchair
Mm-hmm.
fencing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we have a range of disabilities in wheelchair fencing, and we have several categories that those athletes fall under. So for people who aren't familiar,
Yeah, please.
athletes could fall into category A, which tends to be our amputees, um, and that's people with a high degree of trunk mobility.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas athletes in category B have less trunk mobility. They have a tendency to have some kind of spinal cord injury, and I would say are more likely to be full-time chair users.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that's not to exclude that some athletes in category A might be full-time chair users, and some athletes in category B might be able to walk. Scott
Mm-hmm.
Rogers, who you've had on the podcast before, being one of
Yep.
those.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's category C, which tend to have, in addition to the limited trunk mobility, also limitations in what they can do with their arms. So they may have
Mm-hmm.
muscle weakness of some kind or an inability to use certain muscles. So I think that the different categories, right, kind of help define what you might expect to see when fencing.
And we should say
Um,
that at USA fencing tournaments that have para fencing, everyone, at least for now, right? As we continue to grow, this could change, but at least for now, everybody's in one event. But internationally, there is an A and a B event, and is there C internationally?
So they do category C at World Championships.
Okay,
Right now, there are not a lot of category C fencers, even internationally.
okay,
So they have a tendency to combine category C into category B on the
got it,
international stage.
got it.
But yeah, in hopefully soon we'll be able to get all the classification processes in place.
Mhm.
And then we'll be able to, as we grow the number of parafencers, be able to separate out and have those categories at our national tournaments as well.
Yeah, that'll be a good challenge for you and your colleagues like Beth Marr to solve is doubling basically the number of para fencing events at our tournaments. That would be great.
And if I believe in anybody, I believe in Beth to be able to work through this.
Yes, exactly. We have faith in Beth on that. All right, so let's move into kind of our second section, which is bringing parafencing to a club. So let's start with maybe the obstacles that you hear about. Like, what typically prevents a club from adding parafencing? Is it the fear that they're going to do it wrong? Is it the know-how, staffing, space, equipment? Like, what are the challenges? Because I think it's important to identify those before we can say, okay, here's some ways that coaches like Eric and dozens of others out there have conquered those challenges.
Yeah, that is there's a lot of paths we can go with that question.
Yeah,
So
sure.
let me first start with, I think one of the biggest challenges that people run into is equipment,
Okay.
right? Having a frame where someone can safely lock into, so that way the chairs aren't moving all over the place, is really a necessity, because that's what helps keep the athlete safe.
Because there's so much force, right? For people who maybe haven't watched much pair fencing, you got to see like these athletes just put so much force behind these moves, and I'm thinking of Garrett. Like sometimes the entire frame
Yes,
moves when he's
lifts.
like,
Yeah.
yeah. So like if that frame isn't intact and properly installed, maybe for lack of a better word, then it could be a safety issue.
Yeah, and even still, we were in Sao Paulo at a training camp during one of the World Cups. A close friend of mine from Brazil had invited us to their club. Garrett got in that frame and he went for a lunge, and you could see the whole frame kind of like lift up into the air and slam down onto the ground. And
Yeah.
like the whole room stopped and stared. And
Oh,
Garrett's like, no,
geez.
we're good, we're good, we're good.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, so the equipment is an issue, and most people in the beginning are not going to be, Garrett's level of physicality.
Sure.
Um, so one of our para athletes, Rick Swiger, does an excellent job building wooden frames that are affordable for clubs. So I think
Mm-hmm.
that like one of the things that people can do is figure out either how to build something similar to that where they can safely lock a chair into place, or they can reach out to Beth and see what we can do about either a frame lending program, or sometimes there are grants where frames are available. We just sent out a bunch of frames to a variety of clubs over the past season.
Nice.
Um, we have the other issue would be chairs, right? Because
Hmm.
not every athlete has a fencing chair. Fencing chairs are specially designed. It's not the same as an everyday chair or as like a wheelchair basketball chair, right? Every
And
kind of sport chair is a little bit different.
how much is like a fencing chair that you would see someone at like the Paralympic level use, for example?
Sure, they go anywhere between like $3,000, $5,000. A lot of our
Oh, okay.
athletes, yeah, a lot of our athletes get their chairs through grants like Challenge Athlete Foundation.
Okay.
And that's like highly recommended for anyone who's interested in fencing is to find a grant that you can get equipment with.
Gotcha.
Yeah, most of those chairs are very expensive, and while we're working on finding solutions to have more affordable chairs for people, it's when you customize them and you kind of like really build them for your own specifications, it is a one-off, right? And that
Yeah.
takes time and takes a skilled laborer. So they're definitely expensive. But we have Bill Nikolai of the Utah Fencing Foundation has built a distribution network for what we call the Jed's chair. And for those
Hmm.
who don't know, Jed Jensen was Shelby Jensen's father. He unfortunately has passed away. But Utah Fencing Foundation has taken this chair that he designed and in his honor and in his drive for developing parafencing, they are distributing these chairs to clubs across the country. So these chairs are a fantastic way to start getting parafencing in your club because they're super accessible. All you have to do is reach out to Bill, and if he has extra chairs, you're getting one. Like I
Hmm.
haven't seen him really turn anybody down. So I think we have stuff in place as long as clubs know where to look to start developing their programs. I think some of the other challenges that people have is finding athletes who might be parafencers
Sure. Yeah.
because it is a lot more work to be trying to look for parafencers than it is maybe to have 10 kids come in off the street, and a little 10-year-old boy wanting to play with a sword is probably a really really common thing across the country everywhere, right? But
Totally. Totally.
finding people who maybe would want to be involved in parasports is a little bit more time consuming.
Hmm.
So I think that could be one of the other challenges that clubs run into is like how do they reach out or advertise to certain resources. But I think that you can find local VA programs that
Hmm.
might be able to benefit you there, or even like rehab facilities, depending on what your objectives are with parafencing, right? If you're looking to start building a Paralympic level program, you have to create a base from somewhere. So
Yeah.
I definitely think that, reaching out to various, like I said, rehab facilities, VA programs, then, word of mouth, because it's a connected community, people will start to kind of like gather. Um, if you want to see like good examples of people gathering in a space, I would point out Denver Fencing Foundation.
Hmm.
Um, Jay Taylor, who's one of our parafencers, pretty much runs Denver Fencing Foundation, and she's doing an excellent job, attracting people from across the country to come to Denver for having more fencing opportunities. Um, and I think that when you're willing to put in the work,
Hmm.
finding the athletes is definitely a possibility. But I think one of the detractors may be that it takes a little bit more effort to find athletes.
Yeah.
Um,
You can't just put in a flyer at the local middle school,
yeah,
right? And expect
yeah,
parafencers to show up, future parafencers to show up. Yeah.
sure. And I think also maybe people aren't necessarily as familiar with the types of conditions that may qualify someone for parafencing.
Mm-hmm.
So being familiar with that would also be, beneficial to them. So, finding the rules, understanding what conditions might qualify, and like reading through those classification rules is a challenge within itself, right?
Yeah.
So I think there are definitely you can see some roadblocks, right?
Hmm.
Um, but for me, you know, I think I've always viewed fencing maybe just a little bit differently from the perspective of a club owner. I like to build my program for the community. Um, so even if someone might not qualify for, Paralympic level classification because they, maybe are not going to have their condition as severe as it would need to be for the classification.
Right.
I don't think that should stop them from being able to fence, right? So like if it's, too limiting or too painful to be able to fence able-bodied, they can still train in a chair and fence recreationally. And it's a great sport and it's a lot of fun. And
Hmm.
there's great people in this sport. So why not, right? Um, so I think that that's kind of like the approach that I take is like, build for the community first, and then that funnel kind of work itself through to
Yeah.
the higher levels of sport.
Yeah. And we'll talk about one of those higher levels, the LA 28 Paralympics here shortly. But about coach education, as a parafencing coach yourself, if someone were to come up to you at a NAC and say, hey, I've been coaching for 10 years, 20 years, but I've never once coached parafencing, are they out of luck, or what would you tell them? Or what would you tell them if they're saying, yeah, my club is going to be adding parafencing. We've got some interested people from our community. We've got the interest, we've got the equipment. Now we just need the coaches.
Yeah, I mean, so first off, I'm happy to go anywhere and help anyone develop their coaching for
Nice.
parafencing. We need more parafencing coaches.
Right.
And for me, like I've been doing work with the USFCA for the past year and a half, 2 years roughly,
Hmm.
on starting to develop the program that will hopefully help build more coaches, or at the very least bring more visibility to parafencing through the USFCA. In addition to that, for people who are not interested in joining the USFCA, like I said, I happily go across the country. If people don't want to reach out, I think if you're familiar with fencing, you've been doing this for a number of years, as long as you can understand the rules for parafencing, you can probably figure out how to do a lot of the technical skills that are very, very similar. Like I
Hmm.
said before, the big differences would be like some of the angles, some of the tactics that we choose because you can't break distance or collapse distance in a certain way.
Right.
Um, but like the basics are the same. An extension is an extension, right? The difference is we don't lunge from our legs, we lunge from our upper body, right?
Hmm.
Um, so I think that if you spend some time watching video, talking to some parafencers, and even just getting kind of like a basic, like, here's what parafencing looks like, there's a lot that you can figure out if you're already very familiar with the sport.
Yeah. So I think don't don't stress about it. Call up Eric, call up Beth, and give it a try. Right.
Yeah.
So also refereeing, right? So we also know we need more parafencing referees. So um, I guess the question's pretty simple. What do we do there, right? How do we get more parafencing referees? Because as the sport grows, we're going to need more of these individuals.
Yeah. So first off, I think it's important to recognize that doing your certification for parafencing refereeing, that we recognize that there are challenges and we are trying to figure out how to overcome those, right?
Okay.
Because the big hurdle is getting observed right now.
Mhm.
And Sean Shoemate, for those who don't know
Yep.
him, has already started trying to put into place a pathway where we can observe more people at national tournaments, give them feedback, even if they're unable to uh, be observed during the competition, right? The last national tournament, we made a pool afterwards and had some referees observed there. Um, with the growth of the para-regional circuit, I'm anticipating that we're going to be able to do referee observations there as well. But
Nice.
in terms of the course and the testing, if I'm recalling correctly, I believe Sean runs a course for parafencing every Paranac.
Yeah.
So if someone is interested in it, reach out to him and see what he can do. I'm sure he can do it, in a variety of settings. We can maybe see Sean. I'm gonna hope that you can that you agree with this. Maybe we can do some on Zoom for those who maybe can't make it to national tournaments but are still interested in learning. Um, and, for those who can get out to the next, certainly do it in person. I think it's a great experience to do that. And then, as the para-regional circuit grows, I think we're going to be able to grow the observation side of it. And just in time, we're going to start having more referees. I've already had a number of referees who've expressed interest, and it's refreshing to see how many people are treating this with, the level of seriousness that it should be treated with.
And just like in the FIE, as you move your way up in refereeing, you get selected to come to some of these international tournaments. Same thing
Mhm.
with World Ability Sport, right? So there's
Yeah.
there's a pathway there, and we've even had U.S. referees represent us at the Paralympics. I think we had 3 in Paris, right? Sean, Leo, and
Yeah.
Yelena.
Yep.
So what a great honor! And now for those who are listening, what a great opportunity to learn from one of those individuals who has refereed at the highest level of the sport.
For
It's really
sure.
cool. All right, so section 3, looking forward to the future. So we've been talking about LA 28. We've got less than 3 years to go. How are we doing so far as we move toward LA 28? And what's your kind of goal for where you'd like to see the program by the time those Paralympics um, begin at the convention center there in Los Angeles?
Sure. So, to start, I want to kind of like say we're not just looking at LA, right?
Hmm.
We're also looking out towards Brisbane,
Yep.
because when we're thinking about the growth of the program, we have to think about it in a 4-year cycle, an 8-year cycle, a 12-year cycle. So that
Hmm.
way, as we're progressing, we're knowing whether or not we're hitting certain, important milestones. Um, so for what we're doing in terms of setting up for LA, one of the things that we're looking to do is increase the number of training camps that we have accessible to our athletes, and finding ways to mobilize our athletes so they can work together more frequently.
Hmm.
We're also seeing what we can do to get more international camps on our radar,
Hmm.
or at the very least have some fencers from other countries coming in and training with some of our athletes here in the States.
Yeah.
So we're trying to prepare a little bit more strategically than maybe we were able to do for Paris. Um, I think it's very refreshing to know that we have, uh, in addition to all of our upcoming athletes who have a great deal of interest, a returning squad of athletes who also have a great deal of interest in competing in the games. And I think that that level of um, competition will be really, really helpful to
Yeah.
driving our athletes upwards in their skill level. And I also think one of the things that has been very refreshing to me is the way our team interacts with each other.
Hmm.
They're incredibly supportive of each other. If one of them gets an opportunity, they tend to share it with everybody else. So I mean, like it's just very refreshing to see how they work with each other. So I think that if we can, increase the number of instances that they have training with each other, and build that into their start of their qualifying cycle, which will begin in October this upcoming October, actually, next year, 1 year from
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
We have our first zonal competition in Brazil. So we have about a year to get ready for that qualifying season. So I think that we'll see a lot of growth as we can get some more one-on-one attention, some more group work, some more international camps. It'll really start shaping the program in a really amazing, dramatic way.
So Great Britain, they're consistently good in the Paralympics, including parafencing. Like, what do they have? In talking with some of colleagues there, perhaps fencers, like, what does Team GB have? Maybe it's funding, maybe it is that centralized training, or club support. What, like, are there lessons we can take from them and say, hey, we're by the time Brisbane comes around, we're going to be right there with Team GB, competing for Paralympic medals.
Sure. So, Team GB, for those who aren't familiar, has actually one of the top para fencers in the world. His name is Piers Gilliver. Piers is insanely long, athletic, and smart. So he has a lot of just great things going for him as a competitor. Um, and they also have, a very strong women's program with Gemma Collis leading the way. So
Mm-hmm.
for those who aren't familiar, I would definitely say familiarize yourself with GB's fencing, because it's just really, really fun to watch. I think some of the things that we can kind of take away from GB is going to be, first off, like you said, centralized training, right? They have a training environment at the University of Bath where they have a lot of resident athletes already existing there. And I think that that's beneficial to them. They still have some athletes spread out throughout the country, but their long ride to get to training all together maybe is 3 hours,
Yeah.
where
Get
ours
on a
is
train, go 3 hours,
yeah,
and you're there. Yeah.
where ours is a 6 hour flight maybe
Yep.
from
Sure. Yeah.
one coast to the other. And I think that part of the challenge that we encounter is because we have such a large geographic span when compared to Europe, we have a harder time getting the small number of fencers that we have comparatively together. Whereas if we look at Europe,
Hmm.
right, we have,
Mm-hmm.
GB, we have France, we have Hungary, we have Poland, we have athletes from Spain, we have basically athletes from all over, and they can all go kind of compete in satellite tournaments relatively easily, right? For what it would be like for us to compete at a NAC. So they have, I think, more instances of competition. Of course, Italy is one of the top countries in parafencing as well, right? Add them in there into that mix.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so I mean, like when you're competing with high level people on a relatively consistent basis, or even better, they have more access to international training camps because it's a short flight for them, right?
Sure.
Whereas for
Yeah.
us, it's a long flight, a huge change in time zones, some recovery time in there, and then into
Mm-hmm.
training. So it's a little bit different. Um, so I think that the advantages that GB has going for them is they have access, right? And as we progress and try to give our athletes more access to training opportunities, more access to coaching, more access to fencing with each other and other high level athletes, I think that that's going to really make the difference.
Yeah. And when we're having this conversation again after LA, I think we'll see some of that. Um, so the future of parafencing in the U.S., not just thinking about the Paralympics, but if we get everybody like rowing in the same direction, to use a different sports cliche, like what could parafencing look like here if we had the clubs, if we even had some support from colleges, if we had, everything synced up and working well, like what would your dream for parafencing look like?
I mean, I would love to see US be able to compete in parafencing like we do in the able-bodied circuit. When I
Yeah.
first started fencing, it would be kind of like unheard of for the US to be medaling at a World Cup.
Hmm.
And now look at us, right? We have, the top cadets and juniors in the world. Our senior team is amazing, right? So we have some of the top athletes in the world now. And,
Our vets
you
as
know,
well, right? Like you coach
our
some
vets are
vet
amazing.
fencers too. Yeah.
I do, yes. I have a few vet fencers who have competed in vet world championships, and we continue to represent extremely well there. And we're looking forward to doing that again in Bahrain.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that it would be great to see our parafencing program have the support from, you know, the number of coaches that we have for our able body program.
Hmm.
And the more support that we get, the more intelligent, sharp minds that we put behind developing these athletes, the more success we're going to have, right? We already have a bunch of amazing coaches in this country. So if we get those coaches, connected with athletes and those athletes driving and striving for, high level competition results, I don't think anything would stop them.
Yeah. I think that's well said. All right, let's move into our final section here, which is these quick hits. I've got like 5 quick questions for you. Number one, let's say Megan in our foundation, Megan DeFord in our foundation secures, I don't know, I'm just going to throw out a number, $100,000 for parafencing. Like,
Okay.
where would you spend that money? Like, if you were the one who got to make all the decisions, which I know is not the case, but let's just say for
Right.
the sake of discussion, like where would you spend that money to grow the sport?
Okay. Do we get to assume this is just like internal or like, because, and part of that budget is, of course, going towards international competitions. Because, like,
However you want to divide it up, like it's 100,000.
let's just pretend that we already have like the competitions taken care of, right? And that's an
Yeah,
extra
yeah.
$100,000 that we get in the budget. I'd like to see some assistant coaches within the program.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to see people who are able to go out across the country and help develop the sport for, areas that have uncertainties on how to develop parafencing so they can build some confidence. I'd like to see, a robust frame lending program or something of that
Mm,
nature so people have access to equipment. Um, I guess the big thing is, we have to start at the base of the pyramid when it comes to growth, right?
yep.
We have to give people in this country what they need. So not just access to, coaches, but access to the equipment, understanding how it can fit in the spaces. So I think a lot of it would go towards grassroots development.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I would also, take a chunk of that and put that into the high level athletes that already exist and try to help them have, an easier time in their transportation, because that's one of the big challenges when it comes to parafencing, because we have athletes, we have chairs, we have medical equipment, right?
Yeah.
Everybody has a little train that they have to travel with. And it does allow for certain challenges. That is for sure. So if we
Yeah.
could facilitate them, like I said, training more, I would definitely love to take some of that money and put it towards that too.
I love that. All right. So now question two, if a club has made the decision they want to add parafencing, what should be the first phone call or email that they should make?
Email Beth and I.
Okay.
Yeah. Send us
Simple.
send
Yeah.
us an email. Yeah, yeah. So that way we can, if you have any questions, we can help guide you. And if you just email and say, "Hey, we're doing this," then we know that there's a program in that area. And if there's a chance for a demo coming up, or if there's some
Mm,
kind of, like Abilities Expo is running something, right? Then we can connect you guys. So
yeah. So that's
send us an email.
b.mar, MAHR at usafencing.org and e.soyka, SOYKA at usafencing.org. So, perfect. All right. So, number three, do you have like a training drill that you find works really well for both parafencers and able-bodied fencers? Something that everyone benefits from. Maybe it's something with point control, or maybe it's reaction time for saber, something like that. Is there something that you love to do and you find it works well with both types of athletes that you work with?
Okay. So let's go to like a warm up type drill, right? Because
Yeah.
when you look at parafencing, you're looking across all three weapons, and it's hard to say like, hey, this 1-3 drill fits
Yeah.
across
True.
all three
True.
weapons.
Good point.
So I really, really, really like using blaze pods as like a warm up, both like neurologically and physically for the
Mm-hmm.
athletes. And that might be hard to travel with sometimes. So we also have a vector ball, which is a tiny little ball that when you bounce it, it would light up one of three colors. So you can do a bunch of like neurological warm up exercises with that as well.
Cool.
And that's like one of my favorite things to do, regardless of, able-bodied or para, because, getting that nervous system ready for performance is, I think, one of the most important things we can do.
Yeah. I like that. Okay. Number four, we kind of hit on this earlier, but in, let's say, 6 words or fewer, retire one parafencing myth for us. You got to
Yeah,
count
sure.
1, 2.
Might be a few more than six.
Yeah,
I'm just going to phrase it maybe a little bit differently. I'm not going to retire a myth, but I'm going to give people a new mindset.
please.
Parafencers or fencers,
Yeah,
it's the same.
I love that. Yeah, and come to one competition. I think the next one is
February.
January, February. Yes, thank you.
February, yes.
February NAC this time. Yep, February NAC. So yeah, come check it out. Say hi to Eric. All right, and then lastly, is there like a dream partnership or collaboration, some type of like, Phil is really great at getting these sponsorships. So like some type of brand or team or even like a university or something that you think would be great to team up with our parafencing team specifically and help move the sport forward in the US. Like, let's just assume whoever we approach is going to say yes.
That's a that's a really good question. I think it would be really great to develop like a good partnership with someone who can build the custom fencing chairs.
Mm.
Um,
Hmm.
for, if they were going to be able to get more custom fencing chairs out to people for like either like a super low price or, for free, so for the high level athletes, I think that could go really quite a long way in saving people's dollars, right, in their entry into the sport. And
Oh.
the elite athletes, of course, when they're traveling more, those chairs get beat up. So they need to replace them, every few years,
Hmm.
um, or they need to do repairs on them. And quite frankly, I don't always have the time to weld everything. So
I didn't realize that was one of your many skill sets is welding too. So
we add that into the mix. Yeah.
yeah. Well, this is great, Eric. Thank you so much for I don't know, lifting the curtain on parafencing, and I loved talking with you about Paris and then how we can bring parafencing to more clubs. So if you're a club listening, or if you're a member of a club, you know, make that call and find a way to add parafencing and start recruiting in your community. Let's build that the bottom of the pyramid, like Eric said. So this has been First to 15. Be sure to leave us a quick rating and review. It does help us find more listeners of the show. And Eric, thank you so much. We'll see you at the next competition.
Yep. Thanks for having me, Brian.